Hey, welcome to Digging into the Bible. My name is Jim Barnard. This is a production of Taylor Coaching. All right, it's day 39. Holy cow, we are trucking right along. Today we are looking at Jesus' response to what we saw yesterday, which was John the Baptist's untimely death, a major loss. And Jesus' response, I think, is really strong. So let's take a look at that. We're going to dig into Matthew chapter 14, starting at verse 13. Now, when Jesus heard this, he withdrew from there in a boat to a desolate place by himself. But when the crowds heard it, they followed him on foot from the towns. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion on them and healed their sick. Now, when it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a desolate place, and the day is now over. Send the crowds away and go into the villages and buy food for themselves." But Jesus said, "They need not go away. You give them something to eat." They said to him, "We only have 5 loaves here and 2 fish." And he said, "Bring them here to me." Then he ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass. And taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and said a blessing. Then he broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds. And they all ate and were satisfied. And they took up 12 baskets full of the broken pieces left over. And those who ate were about 5,000 men, besides women and children. So what a cool story. The feeding of the 5,000 is amazing. I don't really want to talk about that today. There's 2 instances where Jesus feeds the masses, and we've got another one in a few days where he feeds the 4,000. So let's just talk about that kind of stuff then. Does that sound good? Good. So we are focusing on Jesus' response, right? There are 2 words I really want to key in on. One is desolate, and the other is compassion. And so Jesus found a desolate place to respond to what I really believe is grief. Like, sure, did Jesus know? Yes, like his omnipotent nature, yes, he knew. Like that's a real thing. But that doesn't mean it hurt any less. Like that reality is really unfortunate. Like absolutely brutal. And when you're grieving, man, like nothing makes sense. I think grief is really like the biggest of the expectation gaps. Like we all face expectation gaps, but probably none more bigger than grief itself. And it's really important to learn how to respond to grief. If you don't respond to like loss well, how are you going to find the next win? Like grieving is that process that bridges that gap. And what I believe to be true is, when you're grieving, when you're in any expectation gap, but especially grieving, man, it zaps what's in your cup, man. You find yourself with a real empty cup, and that's a really unfortunate place to be. And, Jesus in the desolate place, he found energy. He found the ability to fill his cup again. Because notice when he came back to shore, it said that, the crowds there were great. And then he chose to give compassion. I think another way to say compassion, like a definition for it, is passion for someone when you don't want to. I mean, like if I'm Jesus there, I'm like, guys, like I just had like this terrible thing happen, and I went to a desolate place because I'm dark and like this is hard. I'm grieving. No, Jesus decides. Just after he finds the ability to fill his cup, he finds the ability to empty his cup again. That's compassion. How he did that was, I believe, this is a great analogy, a great example of the spiritual discipline of solitude. I think solitude is the spiritual discipline that will by far fill your empty cup faster than anything else. Man, I've just found that to be true in my life. I've clearly experienced a lot of grieving. Those times of solitude have actually filled me up. And I love that. I need that. Like I need that more in my life. I coach guys to go find solitude, and they're like, but I like being quiet, being still. That's just uncomfortable. Yeah, it's uncomfortable. Desolation is uncomfortable. And notice, like when Jesus is on the shore and like the crowds are there, the disciples say, "Hey, this is a desolate place, so we got to go send people away." Hang on, bro. Like This isn't a desolate place. Where I was a desolate place. Like, it's desolate, like desolate upon desolate. That's what Jesus found. He went to the most desolate place he could find to get solitude, to be able to fill his cup, to be able to pour himself out with passion, compassion, for the sake of other people. And man, I fully believe that that's our call too. Like, that's what we have to do for other people. It is part of this gig. And so I have a feeling that you have found yourself in the midst of an expectation gap, maybe even grieving. Maybe your cup is really empty. Maybe a desolate place would be really good right now to be able to help fill your cup. So that's what I want to say today. There's so much more to be said about solitude, but we'll have to hit that on another day. I will see you tomorrow as we finish up Matthew chapter 14. I'll see you then.